Welcome to Nextara TV. My name is Joseph, and today's video is Microsoft SharePoint 2010, SharePoint Administrator's Guide Lesson 3, Backups. In this video, I'll be covering how to make sure you're covered if catastrophe strikes. Today we'll be talking about SharePoint backups. We've got our site set up and finally tweaked to the way we like it, and we want to save a copy in case something disastrous happens. For our demonstration, we're going to be using Microsoft's best practices. They can be found at this web address, and they look like this when you actually pull up the web page. Now, to get to the backups, first of all, we have to go to our SharePoint site's central administration page. Now, when we set this up last time, we used the address SP2010, SharePoint 2010, and it defaults to port 30,000. That's where it's taking us here, as you can see right here. Once you get to this, you just have to sign in. Which brings us to our central administration. To get to backups, you go to Backups and Restore. And from here we have two main options. It's a farm backup and a granular backup. Microsoft suggests that for regular backups it's much more effective if we keep them small so that we can speed up the backing up process, the restoring, and generally just easier to manage all the files. This means that for the most part we'd prefer to be doing granular backups. Today, we still want to get a fresh copy of our server, a full backup, so we're going to be going for the large farm backup. When I say large, it's a relative term. It's brand new, there's no content, there's not too much in there to actually back up yet. So, to do that, we'll be coming here to perform a backup under farm backup. This is asking us what we want to back up. Like I said, we're going to be getting everything. We just click Next, and it gives us a few more options. It asks us what type. We have full and differential. A differential backup is when it just copies the changes since the last full backup we've done. Since we want the full thing this time, we're going to go for full. Probably important to note that since we haven't made a backup before, we have to do full because there's nothing for a differential to be different against. We want to get the whole thing. In the future, if you have your granular backup set up automatically, you might only want to get a configuration backup before you make any major changes. Right now, we want to get the content as well as the configuration. Next, it's asking where we want to put our backups. So from here, we'll pull up Windows Explorer and go look at our drives. Microsoft's best practice has a little bit of advice on where we want to take this where we want to store this. It recommends that we want to use a local disk, not one of the network drives, so that we don't associate network slowdowns or any other problems with these backups. Also, doing a backup across the network does tend to bog it down somewhat. Microsoft also cautions us we don't want to use the same disk that the site is actually stored and running from, because then we can run into errors with disk I/O and just a bottleneck situation. So instead of taking and dropping it back to the same location for a backup, we're going to be using an extra backup drive. Now in here I'm going to create a folder to store our backups in. We'll call it Backups. Microsoft also has a couple of other best practices that they want to let us know about, things like making sure you optimize your SQL backups, making sure that if you're using RAID, you want to use a RAID 10. They also have a couple of comments on, depending on the size of your SharePoint, what tool you want to use to do your backups. Ours is a new one under 15 gigs. That lets us do it completely ourselves. The larger your backup gets, the more sophisticated the tool you want to use is. So now that we've got the backup directory, we're ready to actually start the backup. So go into our directory here. We'll get our backup address. I like to cut and paste just to make sure there's no typos. And then you just click Start the Backup. Now when you do, it's going to automatically take you to the Backup and Restore Job Status page. This page is going to keep track of the backup as it runs. It will automatically refresh. Most of us are impatient, so you can click refresh to see where it's at as it's trying to do it. There we can see it's just getting started here. It's preparing everywhere else and just saying that the farm backup is in process. If you do happen to go check on something else, like let's say you pop over here and need to get back to that page, if you go to Backup and Restore, we were doing a farm backup. Here at the end, check Backup and Restore Job Status. Will take us back to where we were at. Now this backup can take a while, and I've often heard it said a watched backup never completes, so we'll minimize this and we can go off somewhere else and take care of something else while we're waiting. And about 10 minutes later we can come back to the web page and find that it has in fact completed. Also, if we do want to try and do a granular backup, it's equally simple. All you have to do is perform a site collection backup, and it's going to ask us which site. Now, here, if you click the drop down, it'll give you the option to change. We really only have the one, as you'll see here. There's also the My SharePoint option here that you could switch to and back up that one separately. For now, we're just going to stick to the main one. And it wants to know where to send the backup. We're going to put it into the same place, but it's also asking for a file name, as you'll see right here. Now, a good idea is always to tell it the name of the site that you're backing up. And you want to know when this backup came from, so it's a good idea to use the date. It's also a good idea to use it in the format of year, month, day, so that it alphabetizes itself in the correct order. And BAK for a backup file. Once you have that whole part entered, click Start Backup. It'll begin. And seeing as how we have no data in here, it's one of the blink and you'll miss it. You'll see it's already succeeded. Thank you for joining Nextara TV for Microsoft SharePoint 2010 SharePoint Administrator's Guide Lesson 3, Backups. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to visit www.nextara.tv for other tutorials, or subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/nextara. Stay tuned for our next installment, Catastrophe Strikes, How to Restore from a SharePoint Backup.